Surprise, you're pulled in. So Danny started the day off talking about the intentions for this event, which has to do with reorienting our space back to really building technology that matters and is going to make a difference in the world. And what that expands out to is what the communities of the future look like. You know, how is this going to be once we do have real world assets, once we are starting to build technology that adds more transparency? So we've got some amazing thinkers up here, and I really want to keep this super open because this is a new conversation, and just, you know, each of you have been thinking about this in very different ways. So this is, again, super inclusive. We want to hear from you guys as well because we're all in this together and we need everyone building this so that we do get kind of out of this hamster wheel of just DeFi tooling for crypto people's sake. So Nelson, you've been working on startup societies and community work for quite some time.
Yeah, so the focus of my work have been a lot around managing assets, right? How do we, because a lot of the value in the physical world is actually who owns the building, right? Like, okay, if you know, there's been plenty of like crypto spaces around the world, plenty of value being created, like a lot of people doing volunteering work, you know, bringing people together. Somebody at some point is making the money, right? So how can we make sure that the people that are involved in raising, creating, growing the value are actually part owners and part beneficiary of that value being created and also being incentivized in the right way. So that's been a lot of my personal focus.
Yeah, super interesting. So I come from a non-crypto background. I work in like cultural studies and theater. I usually work in performance art and also like urban interventions and art as revolutionary practice. So also working with people that don't come from an artistic background, which is also like a big gatekept community. So now I'm in the new gatekeeper community, crypto, where I'm super curious also to speak to people, to hear about their projects, and to also just start a conversation about the worlds that are there and how we can actually apply real-world demands, real-world philosophies about commoning, about bringing people together, about building communities, what you said before, you know. Yeah, so I'm super curious to share some thoughts on that and, yeah, tear down these walls.
Yeah, I'm Adine. I work on things related to the IPFS project. Generally speaking, I feel like the in our space we use the word like decentralized a bunch, but it's sort of a terrible word. It's like at best the opposite of another word, which leaves a whole lot of empty space. I think frequently people want resiliency when they talk about this. They want resiliency to some failures in their systems, and sometimes we get sort of so carried away with like the long picture and then leave all of the resiliency as like to-do items, which leaves us like, what are we doing? Did we make progress? And I don't think that things are quite as far away from building more resilient systems as maybe we think they are. I'm sort of curious how we start to bridge those gaps. If those gaps are UX, if those gaps are something else, like what is it going to take for us to, as a community, start overcoming them and start sort of delivering on the resiliency promises that got us started in the first place?
Do you have thoughts on that? Because I had a conversation with someone from the DFG ecosystem recently who was saying, I asked, when do you think we're actually going to see mainstream adoption of crypto? And this was a year ago, and he said, not in my lifetime. That the internet was, you know, the concept was created in the 30s, and that it took a really long time to actually get to the point that people were using it regularly and adopted it. So I'll let you guys jump in about like, what do you see as being those hurdles and what is it going to take?
Has to connect to the real world. But before going deeper into that, I think, you know, what you said is very interesting about the word decentralized, because I think, as you said, what they're looking for is resiliency and fairness. So, and maybe decentralization is not how you get that necessarily. But how do we actually get adoption? I think it's, you have to connect to the real world and what people are using. You have to connect to the physicality of it and have like actual impact on people's lives. Otherwise, we're just playing a video game and it's all fun. Like we're all like, I love you guys, it's great, but go back, I go back home, I have a daughter, need to pay bills, as Denison was saying. You have cars, you have houses. Like how do you manage your day-to-day life is the most important stuff in the end. So we have to come back to that, I imagine.
I just wanted to chip in on decentralization. So the part where we got really into decentralization was when people started to realize that if you had a central thing, it could be regulated, it could be litigated against, it could face criminal charges. So decentralization meant that there wasn't a hub in the middle that was taking legal responsibility for all the transactions. The transactions were being arranged peer-to-peer without going through a hub. So the decentralization thing was not originally a core part of the story. It came up as people began to understand where the legal liability rested in these systems. Then decentralization became kind of a fetish, and what we got was decentralization equals lawless.
You don't think that decentralization was baked into Bitcoin?
No, not at all. The decentralization in Bitcoin, when we got ASIC mining, right? So I'm from an era where when I got interested in Bitcoin, everybody mined on laptops and there were no ASICs. So when everybody mined Bitcoin on their laptop by leaving it running overnight, issuance of Bitcoin was decentralized. Any Bitcoiner could make their own Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the thing that you made rather than the thing that you bought, right? At the point where we get ASIC mining and you wind up with a relatively small number of miners with a lot of capital behind them dominating the industry, I was going around telling people in 2012, 2013, Bitcoin has, decentralization is dead, it's over. ASIC mining has doomed us because at this point the mining entities are small in number, they're highly identifiable, they're easily targetable by governments because they've got a gigabit of going in and a megawatt going in. And we haven't really been decentralized since. It's largely mythological, right? The legal impact of having peer-to-peer transactions is very real, but political decentralization has not been a thing on the blockchain space for a decade.
It may not be so the problems may still be there, but I think that's different than saying that the premise that people were sold on when they bought into the space was that it did not involve it being there, right? Did not involve that it was supposed to be resilience against failures, whether the failures are the government that you're in or somebody tripping over a Cat5 cable or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Everyone installing the same software that has the same bug because they're running the same OS.
And it is, pragmatically the systems are working very well. It's just that, the history of the language is really important. The kind of genealogy of the ideas. When did decentralization become the concept, right? Well, it was right around here. That was when the word became a big deal. This is when people started to focus on it. What pressure were they under when they decided they wanted decentralization? This is why I think we need rights-based thinking, right? So Stallman's work on the rights of software users could be updated for rights of blockchain users, right? And if we build this out from a rights model, we're going to get much clearer thinking than if we think of decentralization as a way of getting people some set of powers, right? If we don't think about what the goal is in human rights terms, it's very hard to tailor the technology to reach the goals. Anyway, I will depart.
In some ways, the way I understand it is coming back to the vision, why are we doing this? And there's probably maybe there's a difference between the people that were involved in 2012 and 2015 and 2018 and 2022, right? That came into the space for different reasons. But it doesn't mean that we can't actually just go get together and focus on what are we trying to achieve. And maybe there's a different set of goals and maybe there are different communities now we are large enough to subdivide. But at least put a focus on what we want, but especially I think what we've not been good at is what we don't want. Do we want ICOs again? Do we want empty cartoon NFTs? No, we want solid things. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
I just wanted to kind of chime in about, to me, I think one of the things that's really powerful about this system is actually access, right? Many parts of the world, what's been so popular, and you can have opinions of this to the good or the bad, but what makes blockchain very popular in many parts of Southeast Asia is the fact that you can trade coins there, but you can't trade stocks. Like, you're not allowed to. So insofar as making any kind of investments, many of which are very risky, of course, but when you don't have the ability to make other investments, that's sort of your only option, right? And I think you could make the same case about stable coins too, which I think is as being like another one of the really clear like wins for blockchain generally as a currency movement thing. Those have seen widespread adoption where people can actually get value out of them, right? And that's very clear. I think the more sophisticated things get, the longer the time it takes, and sometimes that's exponential. But sort of losing my train of thought here. But anyway, what it comes down to is basically that I think that's really what's so powerful about this, is just that if you can get access to a network, you can interact with it.
I think that's a really good point. I think technology is a medium of power, as well as knowledge is power. And if you are building a technology, you have the power to execute, or you have the power to direct it to your audience. And I feel like when we build these technologies, we make a lot of assumption about our users or the community we're kind of dividing into. I think the greatest technology actually interacts is when the users use it in different ways that you're actually intending it to, because then you start questioning your initial, the initial intentions of the product, and actually only in adoption you see the outcome of it. And I think right now what we're seeing, like you said, that we are, that we're kind of like in a bit of a flood. We had the craze of NFTs where a lot of people were on borders. Now we have proof of stake, but it's still not going in there. Is also because we are not experimenting enough. I think we need more. We need to play more with our protocols, and we need to play more with technology, because only through that people will start adopting it. So it needs to be through, let's say, art. It needs to be through, open source applications, and needs to come through play, that we see the implementations of these real world technologies. And then I think in our lifetime, we can actually see mass adoption of crypto. If we allow play in these processes, and if we allow to play with ourselves.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about the dream world, right? We're talking about the world we all want to see, and as far as I remember, the name of the talk was public goods, right? Imagine the world we'll want to see. And I don't want to live in a world where the incentives are so misaligned, like in the current technological world, where we have 4 corporations that have certain business models that allow them to extract value from the whole world, right? And I think one of the value propositions that these blockchain networks give us is that it lowers the cost of computation to the extent that we can really calculate and understand who we can reward, who doesn't have a business model, right? But at the same time, we have a system we can trust. That's the point of the blockchain, right? It's a decentralized computation, and we can create all these programmable primitives that we can execute and understand. Okay, this layer provides value to everybody. We need to reward them. This layer provides value to this community. We need to reward them. They don't have a business model that they can use, but they create enormous value for everybody. So I would want to live in the world where all these layers of public goods are accessible to everyone, and those people are rewarded. And if you come up with a business model, great. But there are a lot of projects that started as public goods. Uniswap started as a public good. They didn't have a business model first. They found it, which is great for them, but not everybody does. So I think we need to use the technology that we have to create mechanisms that will allow us to understand how to reward people that don't have business models.
Yeah, I think that's sort of, it's sort of weird. I've met a number of groups that are forming new companies, new entities, trying to figure out how to sort of take their project and turn it into a thing. And you have to figure out how you're going to pay the bills, like we've been talking about. And sometimes you had a really good idea, and then you had to make the good idea worse in order to like slam the business model where it didn't really belong, but like you needed it there. And like everyone is sort of worse off for it. Right. No, but that's a good one. Yes. All right. Like you like made it worse in order to fit the business model in, because that's the way to make it sustainable, because unclear how to get the public goods funding to operate correctly. So I think that's like very important. I also wonder if it relates to helping keep things like sort of on the rails. So I think you made a point about people experimenting, and this is how we get growth. I think that's part of what has enabled the Ethereum ecosystem to grow, is basically when you build a thing, you feel ownership over it, and once you feel ownership over it and it's partially yours, you're invested in its growth, right? And so smart contracts are a way of saying, I don't have to do an EIP and get the entire world to sign off to like make a change. I just make a change, right? And now it's partially mine. But also, as these things go and we build, we find bugs, we find issues, we try to patch them so they don't go off the rails. And we may run into problems in the meanwhile, right? You can think of maybe like, if you previously just had an IP address, you could serve some content and it would load in, a browser or wherever. And then we were like, uh-oh, wait, we can have man-in-the-middle attacks and stuff. We better add some sort of certificate authorities in the middle. And now it's like, well, how do I host a website? Well, let me go ask my good friends at VeriSign to say I'm okay, and then I'll be allowed to publish a website. And then we have to go back the other way, and Let's Encrypt has to come in and say, okay, I'll help you guys. Just find someone to buy a domain name. So now they're the blockers, not the CA. And so like having some public goods to help maybe keep things on the rails of like why we started, so that it doesn't take 20 years to start sort of cycling back and be like, where'd my Web 1 go?
So that's a perfect entrance into the question. We've got 5 minutes left, and I would love to know, if you had a magic wand 5 years from now, what problem have we solved?
Who wants to start? 5 years from now, it gives us a lot of leeway. Owning physical assets is as easy as click on Amazon and buy something. Just allowing people to participate at the economy as little as possible. When you need to buy a house, you don't need like a bank. You can just get your friends pulled together, and they all profit from the economy. So kind of like have solved, co-ownership insurances at low level, so we can create, instead of like micro loan, micro insurances and micro co-ownership of stuff, because ownership is where you get equity and where you elevate everyone around the world. So I see that as like, it seems not a sexy problem, but I really think that's the one.
Okay, I have a bit more of a sexy answer. In 5 years, if I would have a magic wand, I think I would go back to the real, or my personal connection, like how technology acts in the future, and that is non-hierarchical, it's non-static, it's self-governed, like it ensures self-governmentality, and it actually overrides physical borders. So physical nation borders, physical borders like differentiations between race, class, and gender, and to actually have these physical limitations solved on a metaphysical level in a crypto space. That's my utopia.
Do you prefer to go?
You go ahead.
So if I had a magical wand to fix something 5 years from now, I've been reflecting how I grew up in that time of world kind of stability, and it feels like it's always been there, right? And yesterday we were talking, I took democracies for granted, but I think the reality is that we live in this kind of anomaly, and it takes so much work, so much intentional work to keep things fair and, like, I want to say decentralized, but like kind of prevent from getting centralized again. And what I would like to see in our ecosystem is that we kind of find what are those answers, like, because right now we have the evolution of the protocol tied to the economics, to the crypto economics, and it takes this constant work to kind of fix that. So I wish we had this magic wand and we could just focus on building, because I feel like this is going to take a lot of energy and a lot of like our best efforts.
Yeah, I feel like everybody else is being very ambitious with their magic wands. Mine will be maybe a little less so. Technology sort of runs our lives in like a myriad of ways. I'd like that the things that we rely on to get to run our lives, right? To talk to the people we want to talk to get our work done, to get food, right? That the number of things required to collapse before those systems start collapsing is at least 3, right? Just 3 as a minimum. If we can get there in 5 years, I feel like we'll have made progress. And I know my magic wand's not as vicious as the others, but maybe that'll be enough.
Can I add one more? Actually, I had more time to think about it, but I think actually, if I had a real powerful, amazing magic wand, what I would do is kind of like bring truth into our transactions. And what I mean by that is like integrating externalities, because the issues that we have, a lot of the issues we have around the world, climate change, exploitation, slavery, like a lot of the stuff, like the stuff in our phones, like how it's made, like if you bought something and you knew, this took like this truck moving in, this was like, it was mined there, it was made by this person, you would have all the information, and there was like symmetry of information between the buyer and the seller. Like, I think then we would know how the world actually runs. And it might be a fucking scary thought to know, like, I think there's some studies and estimation that every person, in this room has probably like more or less 3 slaves working for them, just for their clothes or whatever. Like somewhere where you pay money, indirectly, maybe 100 steps ahead, that's how it actually happens. So if we actually knew what it took to run the world, then we could actually take a hard look at it and fix it. And if we could fix it and create like the incentives, the new business models around making it better, we would probably live in a slightly better place in 5 years. So that's mine.
And the invitation is to you guys to continue thinking big. Like, let's Disney this up. Let's throw out the editors. Let's make sure that we're just getting as creative as possible, because as the Ethereum proverb says, with all eyes on the problem, there is no problem. So thank you for dreaming with us, guys. Danny, you want to close us out?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today at the Dream World. We're going to leave you today with a poem from James Hughes, who is an American poet, social activist, and novelist who is best known for being the leader of the Harlem Renaissance. 1 second as I pull it up. Okay, he says, it's titled Dreams. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. So we urge you today to hold on to your dreams, to dream big, to dream about the future and the world that Ethereum can enable, a world that is more open, more fair, that is better than the one that we have today. We thank you for joining us in the Dream World. Thank you to all of you, and hope to see you somewhere else.